I was involved with a local, pretty popular local storytelling event called Lip Service. Lip Service was true stories out loud. And I came to co-produce it eventually, but before I did that, I was a participant. And you would submit a story. Anyone could submit a story, 1,200 words or less, had to be true, and those were the only criteria. Then if your story was selected, you'd go through an editing process and a coaching process to present the story live. And a local woman here, a writer in Miami, Andrea Askowitz, had founded the Lip Service, and she had a co-producer, Esther Martinez, who happened to be in the MFA program with me at the same time. I had spun off an essay called When in Fire Island, which is a chapter in the story that is really, if there is a climax to the story, that's where it happens. It happens on a very intense weekend in Fire Island. So they picked me, scheduled to go on, and I was single at the time. And it occurred to me that the action, the storyline in When on Fire Island was so over the top. I mean, it starts off with a description of a straight couple that my ex-wife and I had brought to Fire Island, thinking it would be, gee, wouldn't it be fun to experience this crazy scene with another straight couple? And the opening scene is they're in a hot tub having sex with each other, surrounded by an audience of gay men and me and my ex-wife. And they have been not only having sex with each other, but also sex with us. And everyone is high out of their minds. And the story just sort of descends from there. Before I went on that night, I told the producer, I said, I read this story, and this will guarantee that I stay single the rest of my life. There is not a girl out there who is going to take a chance on a guy who is about to tell the story I'm going to tell. And I was kidding, but not really. So I tell the story, and there's always an after party at Books and Books, a bookstore right across the street from the Miracle Theater where the reading took place. And there were a good 300-400 people in the audience. So what would happen after the show, everyone would descend on the courtyard over at Books and Books and drink and carry on. And so I was over there, and it turns out that Esther, the co-producer, her husband, who is a doctor, had brought along a friend of his to possibly fix her up with me. And so we met at the after party, and for reasons that are still not quite clear to me, she wasn't appalled by my story. And she said later on, she would say, well, the reason I wasn't is because it didn't seem like you were glorifying that life. It seemed like you were telling it with some element of maybe not regret, but at least you seem to have some distance from it. If things had been turned around, I'm not sure I would have said the same thing. So anyway, that's where I met, ironically, that's where I met my now wife. And so among other things, I owe my marriage in a strange way to my memoir, In the Pink. She was divorced. I had 2 children. At the time, they were 7 and 10. And I went from, let's leave the lifestyle depicted in The Pink, because my ex-wife, Rachel, had no interest in children or ever having them. But I grew up an only child. I had a very small family. I had never even dated anyone who had children. So I went from bachelorhood living in Miami Beach to where we live now, a lovely house in the suburbs, on a place called Minneapolis Drive, which might give you an idea of the kind of setting, and it was an adjustment. It in all ways, in terms of setting, lifestyle. I like to say that the first thing I learned is that you cannot use the standards that you apply to judge character and behavior to adults, that you cannot ascribe that behavior to children. And at first I was like, wow, these guys are so selfish. And finally I learned, wait a minute, they're kids. This is what they do. And so since then, it's really been a fascinating process for me that has taught me, I think, a lot about myself. I have become, being an only child, there are many advantages to it, but you are in many ways you grow up being a selfish, in many ways the world revolves around you. And I have learned now that the world does not always revolve around me, and that there are these other beings in the world that deserve as much attention as you always thought that you deserved. And so now, now the oldest one is 18, going to college next fall. The youngest one is 14, completely obsessed with playing ice hockey. And so it's been a real journey. I'm glad I got to experience it. My wife says, though, that I'm lucky because I missed infanthood and strollers and diapers and all that stuff. She doesn't think I would have done very well with that phase of parenting.